the second part of this chapter is pretty easy. It just talks about the different regions on Earth. And this slide is just giving examples of abiotic factors. So once again, these are the non-living factors that are important for living things. So energy source, temperature, water solute concentration, nutrients being what we talked about in the last part, so the amount of carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus that's in the soil and the air. Other aquatic factors, dissolved oxygen, nutrients, so this would be for in the water again, and terrestrial factor, wind is just another example. And so I'm going to write down here is be able to give an example of an abiotic factor on the exam. Yeah, I think I asked just one on the exam. And so then we're going to talk about the first terrestrial ecosystems, so the land regions, and we're going to see that there are 8 major types of biomes. So the biomes are distinguished by the different climates and the different vegetation, and we're going to see that, let me write this down, start here. It's the latitude. Latitudes determine the biomes. Okay, so what does the latitude mean? Next slide here. And so these lines that they drew here, these are the latitudes. So here the equator latitude, that is at 0. There's another latitude. Longitudes instead go up and down. Okay, so the way I kind of remember is I think longitudes are long. Longitudes go this way, but the latitudes go east to west. Okay, so this picture is showing different colors here. And if you notice that the colors are somewhat lining up. So here we're seeing the tropical forest around this region. At the top, you have the tundra, the very, very cold region there. Yeah, below that, the coniferous forest. And so yeah, we're seeing kind of a trend here. Okay, so we're going to start with the tropical forest. And so what I'm going to ask you is, it'll just be kind of multiple choice questions. Know the main characteristics of these different biomes. So the tropical forests, these are in the warm, moist belts along the equator. Write down that here. Many different species live in these tropical rainforests, so very diverse. To know that, most diverse ecosystems, home to many species, different plants. So a lot of plants that we haven't discovered yet that could be very, very useful to us. But we are using a lot of plants from the tropical forest to make medicines. Very little sunlight penetrates to the forest floor. Now, in tropical forests, the soil is nutrient poor because the rate of decomposition is fast. Okay, so savannas. Savannas are mainly grassland, very few trees, long periods of droughts. But here in savannas, we're seeing large herbivores. So zebras, elephants, giraffes, and there are predators, different insects, and different animals, digging animals as well. Deserts. Deserts are the driest. Very low amount of rainfall and unpredictable, so sometimes you might actually get a lot of rainfall that could lead to floods. They have very extreme temperatures, very dry. In the driest deserts, they're just very few plants, maybe no plants at all. Less dry areas, less arid. Yeah, here we see cactuses, different types of plants there. Now, desertification, this is something that humans are responsible for. This is when humans cut down the trees and affect a biome so that it turns into a desert. Of course, unintentionally, but it is the result of cutting down trees. and also putting different dams as well. One thing though, some deserts, now this is not human caused, but some deserts are caused by rain shadows of mountain ranges. So what I mean by this is there's a picture on the next slide that shows this. So we see this in California. This is also seen in South America by Chile and Peru. So here, behind big mountain ranges, the moisture cannot pass through. So behind the mountain ranges, it ends up being a desert inside there. Okay, the next one, chaparral. This type of biome is in the coastal areas, so California, Mediterranean coast. So of course this is um, in front of the mountains, not behind. And here we see shrubs, short trees, cool rainy winters, dry hot summers. Yeah, so the winters are not very, very cold there. There are a lot of fires in these regions, but what happens is very interesting. These plants that live here have evolved to come back to life. So the roots of these plants can actually survive the fires, and then afterwards, the plant can regrow. Temperate grasslands, this is where we are. So this is the Midwest, where the winters are cold and the summers can get pretty hot. So here we do see a lot of droughts, some fires, but a lot of grazing animals because this is a lot of grassland. Amount of rainfall is kind of interesting, but it makes sense. Amount of rainfall determines the height of grass. But yeah, unfortunately, farms have replaced a lot of this grassland, the native grassland, and as a result, a lot of the animal species living here. Broadleaf forest. So here, these areas have large trees, such as oak, maple trees. And here's another one. Agriculture, urban developments have led to the loss of these trees and the ecosystem. So an example of this, the Appalachians, big beautiful trees in the Appalachians. And so in this region, the soil has a lot of nutrients. The northern coniferous forest. Now, also know that this is the other word for it, the taiga, largest terrestrial biome on Earth. So here, this is the northern part. So northern part of America, North Asia, so Canada. When we say North America, it means the upper part of the continents. Yeah, so long cold winters here. Here, the coniferous forests. These are the evergreen trees. Okay, now the coldest parts, the tundra, Arctic tundra. But of course not the very coldest because it's between the taiga, underline that here, between the taiga and the polar regions. So here, treeless biome, very few plants here, few animals, a lot of foxes live here, wolves live here, and rabbits. But yeah, these animals have to have very thick coats. And so here in the Arctic tundra, the soil, the subsoil underneath is always frozen. So it's called a permafrost. So if you know this word, know that permafrost is a continuously frozen subsoil. For the aquatic biomes, so we have the oceans, but also the freshwater regions. Oceans cover about 75% of the Earth's surface. So what we're also going to see is the different regions in the oceans. So the amount of light, the availability of resources, nutrients, are what's determining the amount of fish there are, or the plants that live in these parts of the aquatic biomes. So we need to know here, photic zone. This is where light can still penetrate into the water. So if light can get in, then photosynthesis can occur by these species. So photosynthesis occurs by algae, cyanobacteria in the water. And so here, because there are a lot of nutrients available here, this is where a lot of fish, marine mammals live. The aphotic zone, here very little light gets down here. So here the food, the nutrients from the photic zone sink down to this level. The fish that might be living in this zone, they do sometimes go up to the photic zone to feed, if there's enough nutrients available in the aphotic zone. And then the abyssal zone, this is the deepest part of the ocean. There are no photosynthetic organisms, but instead here there are the chemosynthetic bacteria. So here they're using the hydrogen sulfide that the vents let out, and so then these chemosynthetic organisms are using those resources. Okay, and so we can see here the photic zone. This is where photosynthesis occurs. Yeah, the cyanobacteria, algae. Aphotic zone, little light gets through here, and the nutrients sink down. The abyssal zone, so then this is the deepest. Very little nutrients here, but the chemosynthetic bacteria organisms are able to use the nutrients there. Coral reefs, one of the most diverse biomes, the aquatic biome. Corals belong to the phylum called the Cnidaria, so it shows here the pronunciation. So corals actually belong to this family that includes the jellyfish, anemones, Portuguese man of war. You can look up what those look like if you want through Google. And so the corals are, again, just we learned in the last chapter, it's a type of an animal species. But so the corals have a symbiotic, mutually beneficial relationship with these other species. So zooxanthellae, so these are actually algae. And so here the algae and the corals are living together. The algae live inside the coral polyp's body. The algae are photosynthesizing different sugars. And so then these sugars, the molecules, are used by both the algae and the coral polyp. And the polyps, in turn, provide a home and carbon dioxide for the algae. So if I ask you on the test, what two species are the coral reefs composed of? You know that it's the coral polyps and the algae living together. And so here we're seeing the picture of the coral reefs. Coral reefs are formed by the calcium carbonate skeletons of coral organisms. And so here when the coral organisms die, then they give off the calcium. A few more of these aquatic biomes. Estuaries, you have to know this word. Estuaries are where rivers meet the ocean. And around the estuaries, so a lot of different species live here. Around the estuaries are the wetlands. And so wetlands are lands covered by water. They're home to many different animals and plants. And so here we're seeing in this picture, I believe this part here is supposed to be the ocean. So here the rivers are coming. And so here the land, these are the wetlands.